I can still feel the weight of that cardboard box in my hands. 20 years of loyalty packed away in 5 minutes flat. We're going in a different direction, Monique. That's all my boss said before security appeared at my office door. 2 decades at Houston Financial Partners, gone. Just like that. No warning. No real explanation. Just a severance check they thought would buy my silence. The fluorescent lights in the elevator seemed to mock me as I descended from the 32nd floor for the last time. My throat burned with unshed tears. I refused to let them see me break. I stepped into the humid Houston air, the third ward still miles away, but the corporate towers already feeling like another world. My world had just imploded, and everyone else was just going about their day. "Lord, where are you?" I whispered, standing frozen beside my car. 20 years, 20 years I gave them everything. The security guard watching from the garage entrance probably thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. My phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from the community center where I volunteered on weekends. The only piece of my heritage I'd managed to keep alive while climbing the corporate ladder. Another text from my friend Keisha. "Girl, call me back. Something's wrong with your voice in your last message." I couldn't bear to talk to anyone. Not yet. Especially not Keisha, who'd been warning me for years that I was changing, becoming someone she didn't recognize. "You sound white on your work calls," she'd said last month, and I'd hung up on her. I just sat in my car, air conditioning blasting against the Houston heat, wondering how I'd tell everyone that Monique Jackson, the success story, the one who made it, had been discarded like yesterday's trash. At 38, who would hire me now? The mortgage, the bills, my entire identity, all tied to that corner office I no longer had access to. My phone rang. Max. Of course he'd choose now to call. "Baby, how's your day going?" His deep voice usually comforted me, but today it grated. "Fine," I lied, my voice artificially bright. "Just busy." "Good. Listen, my wife wants to know if you're free for dinner Sunday. She's making that jerk chicken you liked." My stomach clenched. His wife. The one he was supposedly leaving when the time is right. The one whose existence made our 3-year relationship a constant source of guilt. "Max, we can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" "I told you. The divorce papers are almost ready. She just needs more time to—" I hung up. I couldn't deal with his promises today. Not when my whole life was crumbling. I tried calling my pastor, straight to voicemail. I needed someone to make sense of this betrayal. 20 years of missed family dinners. 20 years of being the first one in and last one out. 20 years of code switching and carefully navigating office politics as the only Black woman in senior leadership. For what? A box of personal items and a security escort? I pulled into the driveway of my townhouse in Midtown, the beautiful place that suddenly felt like it might not be mine much longer. The emptiness inside matched the hollow feeling in my chest. My Bible sat on the coffee table where I'd left it Sunday, untouched all week, like most weeks. I'd been too busy preparing quarterly reports to prepare my spirit. Why Jesus? I did everything right. I worked hard. I played by their rules. I even led the company's diversity initiative. My words echoed in the empty house. But even as I spoke them, I knew they rang hollow. Had I really done everything right? What about Max? What about the way I distanced myself from my third ward roots? What about the lies I told myself every day? I opened my laptop and did what any desperate professional would do. I tried to buy my way out of consequences, applied for credit line increases, called headhunters, scrolled through LinkedIn until my eyes burned. Nothing. No immediate escape from this nightmare. My phone buzzed with texts from my girls, Keisha, Tamara, and Denise. They were planning their weekly Thursday dinner, the one I'd been skipping for months because of work commitments. "Keisha, Mo, you better show up tonight. We need to talk." "Tamara, something's been off with you lately. For real." "Denise, Third Ward Cafe, 7 p.m. Don't make us come get you." These women had known me since high school. They'd celebrated when I got my first corporate job, cheered when I bought my townhouse, but they'd also watched me slowly drift away. Watched me trade my natural hair for a relaxer, my Houston accent for corporate speak, my Saturday nights with them for work events with people who barely tolerated my presence. Night fell, and I found myself driving toward the third ward, toward the cafe where we used to meet every week, before I decided networking events were more important. The neighborhood looked different now, gentrification creeping in, new condos rising where old houses used to stand. But Third Ward Cafe remained unchanged, its neon sign flickering the same welcome it had for 20 years. I parked and sat for a moment, watching through the window as my three friends waited at our old corner table. Keisha checked her phone, worry creasing her brow. Tamara stirred her coffee absently. Denise kept glancing toward the door. These women had been there through everything. My mama's death, my struggles in college, my first heartbreak. When had I started treating their friendship like an obligation instead of a blessing? I walked in, and the conversation stopped. Three pairs of eyes studied my face with the precision that comes from decades of friendship. "You look like hell," Keisha said without preamble. "Sit down." I collapsed into the familiar booth, the vinyl squeaking like it had 1,000 times before. The smell of fried catfish and cornbread enveloped me, carrying memories of simpler times. "I got fired today," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Silence. Then Tamara reached across the table and squeezed my hand. 20 years, I continued, my voice breaking. "They said they were going in a different direction. Those fools," Denise muttered. "After everything you gave them, maybe it's a blessing," Keisha said quietly. I jerked my hand away. "A blessing? How is losing everything a blessing? Because maybe now you can remember who you are." Keisha's voice was gentle but firm. "Mo, we've been watching you disappear for years, watching you become someone we barely recognize." "I was building a career. You were building a prison," Tamara interrupted. "When's the last time you came to church with us? When's the last time you laughed? Really laughed? When's the last time you dated someone who wasn't married?" The last question hit like a slap. My friends knew about Max, had been warning me about him for years, but I'd dismissed their concerns, convinced they didn't understand the complexities of successful relationships. "Max is getting divorced," I said weakly. "Max has been getting divorced for 3 years," Denise said. "And you've been waiting for 3 years, compromising your values for 3 years. You don't understand." "We understand perfectly," Keisha cut me off. "You're so desperate to fit into their world that you've forgotten you belong to something bigger, something better." I wanted to argue, but the fight had gone out of me. They were right. I'd been living a lie for so long that the truth felt foreign. "I don't know how to get back," I whispered. "Start by remembering whose you are," Tamara said softly. "Not who your boss says you are. Not who Max says you are. Whose you are." That night I drove home with my friend's words echoing in my mind. I stood in my bathroom mirror, studying the stranger looking back at me, the relaxed hair, the neutral makeup, the designer clothes that cost more than my grandmother's rent used to be. "Who am I?" I asked my reflection. But the answer that came back wasn't one I was ready to hear. 3 months earlier, I had stood at the window of my corner office on the 34th floor, gazing across the Houston skyline. The morning sun glinted off glass buildings, casting the city in a golden glow. My reflection stared back at me, tailored suit, straightened hair, pearl earrings, the picture of corporate success. "Monique," my assistant knocked lightly. "Your 9 a.m. is here, and the quarterly reports are on your desk." I smiled, adjusting my blazer. "Thank you. Send them in after I've had 5 minutes with the numbers." 20 years at Houston Financial Partners had earned me this view, this respect. Executive Vice President of Operations. The nameplate on my door still gave me a flutter of pride every morning. In the third ward where I grew up, my story was legendary. That Monique, they'd say at church potlucks and community meetings, she broke right through that ceiling. My success had become a reference point for possibility. Parents told their children to study hard like Miss Monique, to speak well like Miss Monique, to aim high like Miss Monique. What nobody saw was the weight of being the only Black woman in most meetings. The exhaustion of code switching, one voice for the boardroom, another for Sunday dinner with the girls. The careful management of my reactions when microaggressions slid across conference tables. "Great job on the Henderson acquisition," my CEO had said last week. "You're so articulate when you present the numbers." I'd smiled and thanked him, swallowing the familiar sting. 20 years of swallowing. That afternoon, Max called. "Free for lunch?" I glanced at my calendar, back-to-back meetings until 6. I wish I could, but come on, baby. We barely see each other anymore. The guilt in his voice almost worked. Almost. But I'd already rescheduled this client lunch twice. Tonight, I offered. Your place? Can't. Candace is having her book club over. Candace, his wife, the woman whose existence made every moment of our relationship feel stolen. 3 years of she doesn't understand me, and the timing isn't right, and after the kids graduate. This weekend then, I said, hating how desperate I sounded. We'll figure something out, he replied, but we both knew we wouldn't. I hung up feeling empty. When had our relationship become a series of stolen moments and borrowed time? When had I started accepting crumbs and calling them a feast? At lunch, I sat alone in the corporate cafeteria, surrounded by colleagues who smiled and nodded but never truly saw me. I scrolled through social media, watching Keisha's posts from her daughter's dance recital, Tamara's pictures from her church's mission trip, Denise's celebration of her 5th wedding anniversary. Real life, authentic relationships. The things I'd traded for corner offices and stock options. My phone buzzed with a text from Max. Dinner canceled, emergency at home. Emergency. That was his word for whenever Candace needed him. Whenever their real life intruded on our fantasy. I stared at the message until my eyes blurred. 3 years of being the other woman. 3 years of lying to my friends, my family, myself. 3 years of compromising everything I'd been taught about love and respect and worth. That evening, I stayed late at the office, not because I had work to do, but because going home meant facing the emptiness. My townhouse, beautiful as it was, felt like a museum, everything perfectly arranged, nothing genuinely lived in. I opened my laptop to review the quarterly projections one more time. Something didn't add up in the international division. I dug deeper, cross-referencing reports, finding discrepancies that raised red flags. This wasn't sloppy accounting. This looked deliberate. My stomach dropped. I'd built my reputation on integrity and precision. If these numbers were wrong, if someone was cooking the books, my signature was on half the reports. I worked until midnight, following the trail of falsified data. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Someone was stealing from client accounts, moving money through offshore entities, covering their tracks with quarterly adjustments, and my name was on every authorization. The next morning, I took my concerns to Richard, my immediate supervisor and mentor for the past 15 years. You're overthinking this, he said dismissively, not even looking up from his computer. We need those numbers for the investor call tomorrow. Just prepare your usual stellar presentation. Richard, these discrepancies could indicate fraud. We need to Monique. His voice carried a warning I'd never heard before. You've built a great career here by being a team player. Don't change now. I left his office with ice in my veins. The implication was clear. Shut up or face consequences. But how could I stay silent when clients were being robbed? When my integrity was being compromised? That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I prayed. Not the perfunctory bedtime prayer, but a genuine reaching out. Lord, I don't know what to do here. I've worked so hard to get where I am. Show me the right path. The silence felt heavy. When had Jesus and I stopped having real conversations? When had my prayers become formalities rather than relationship? The next day I presented the numbers as instructed but carefully worded my statements to avoid direct endorsement of the questionable figures. Richard noticed, shooting me warning glances throughout the call. What was that? He demanded afterward. You nearly tanked our stock price with that hesitant delivery. There are inconsistencies in these reports, I said firmly. We need to investigate before we make stronger claims. His face hardened. You know, Monique, you've changed. You used to understand how things work around here. I had understood. For 20 years, I'd played by their rules, laughed at their jokes, straightened my hair, modulated my voice, worked twice as hard for the same recognition. I'd compromised in 1,000 tiny ways until compromise felt like survival. But standing in that conference room, watching Richard's face twist with disappointment at my sudden attack of conscience, I realized something had shifted inside me. Maybe it was turning 38 and realizing I was closer to 40 than 30. Maybe it was watching my friends build authentic lives while I collected expensive things. Maybe it was the growing emptiness that no promotion could fill. Or maybe it was the memory of my grandmother's voice. Baby, you can have all the money in the world, but if you lose your soul getting it, you ain't got nothing. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to church. Not the prestigious downtown congregation, where I'd been attending sporadically, where the pastor knew my donation amount, but not my name. I went home, to Greater Hope Baptist in the 3rd Ward, where I'd been baptized at 12, where my grandmother's prayers still echoed in the sanctuary. Pastor Williams was delivering the morning message when I slipped into the back pew. You cannot serve God and money, he declared, his voice carrying the weight of decades in ministry. You cannot build your life on the approval of man and expect God's blessing. The words hit me like physical blows. I sat in that pew, surrounded by familiar faces, people who'd known me before corporate success, before designer clothes, before I'd learned to speak without a trace of Texas in my voice. Mrs. Washington, my Sunday school teacher from childhood, spotted me during the greeting time. Her weathered face lit up with genuine joy. Monique, baby, look at God. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like cocoa butter and unconditional love. We've been praying for you, praying for me. Child, you think we don't know when one of our own is hurting? You think God don't show us when somebody we love is walking in darkness? Her words broke something in me. These people, these beautiful, faithful people I'd been unconsciously looking down on for years, had been covering me in prayer while I'd been too proud to ask for help. After service, I sat in my car in the church parking lot, watching families gather for Sunday dinner, children playing in the small courtyard, teenagers flirting by the steps. Real community, authentic fellowship, the things I'd traded for networking events and wine tastings, with people who barely tolerated my presence. My phone buzzed. Max free for lunch. Candace took the kids shopping. I stared at the message, seeing it clearly for the first time. Even his invitations came with reminders that I was secondary, that his real life happened without me, that I was a convenience, not a priority. For 3 years, I'd told myself our relationship was complicated but worth it. That love conquered all. That timing would eventually work in our favor. But sitting in that church parking lot, surrounded by families built on commitment and sacrifice, I saw the truth. I wasn't in love. I was in compromise. And compromise was killing me slowly. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on the truth. I can't do this anymore, Max. I'm done. My phone rang immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. When I finally listened to his messages hours later, they followed a predictable pattern: confusion, anger, promises, manipulation. You're just stressed about work, his final message said. We'll talk when you're thinking clearly. The condescension in his voice made my skin crawl. When had I become someone who accepted being spoken to like a child? When had I become someone who waited for a married man to choose me? That night, I sat in my townhouse, all 2,000 square feet of it, and felt smaller than I ever had in my childhood bedroom. My success, my independence, my carefully curated life felt as hollow as a movie set. I picked up my phone to call Keisha, then put it down. How could I admit that she'd been right about Max? About the way I'd been living, about the person I'd become. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my Bible, the one my grandmother had given me at high school graduation, leather-bound and engraved with my name. The pages crackled as I turned them, crisp from disuse. It fell open to Matthew 6. You cannot serve both God and money. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. I read those words over and over until they blurred with my tears. 20 years of serving money. 20 years of worrying about tomorrow. 20 years of building my identity on things that could be taken away in a moment. Monday morning came with a vengeance. The quarterly reports still needed investigation. Richard still expected my compliance. And now I had Max calling every hour, demanding explanations I didn't owe him. I made a decision that would change everything. I requested a meeting with the head of compliance and laid out every discrepancy I'd found, every falsified number, every suspicious transaction. I brought documents, spreadsheets, a timeline of suspicious activity. This goes all the way to the executive level, I concluded, my voice steady despite my racing heart. The compliance officer, a sharp woman named Janet, whom I'd always respected, studied my evidence with growing alarm. Monique, this is serious. If you're right about this, heads are going to roll. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my corner office, my parking space, my salary, my reputation, everything I'd built over 20 years. Then I thought about my grandmother's voice. You do right even when it costs you, baby, especially when it costs you. I'm prepared, I said. The investigation moved quickly, too quickly for someone to cover their tracks completely. Within 2 weeks, the FBI was involved. Financial records were subpoenaed, and 3 executives, including Richard, were arrested for embezzlement and fraud. That's when I learned the plot twist that changed everything. I wasn't just a whistleblower, I was supposed to be the scapegoat. During the federal investigation, agents uncovered emails I'd never seen, communications between Richard and the other conspirators discussing how to frame me for their crimes. My signature on the reports wasn't accidental oversight, it was deliberate setup. They've been planning this for months. Agent Rodriguez explained during one of my interviews. Your termination wasn't about restructuring. They were preparing to blame the fraud on you. Your firing was supposed to happen right before the scandal broke. The room spun. 20 years of loyalty, and they'd been planning to destroy me to save themselves. If I hadn't spoken up, if I hadn't followed my conscience, I would have been facing federal charges instead of them. Why? I asked. Though part of me already knew. You were the perfect fall guy, Rodriguez said gently. Ambitious, visible, easy to paint as someone who might cut corners to get ahead. And if it came down to their word against yours, he didn't need to finish. A black woman against 3 white executives in corporate America, the narrative would have written itself. That night, I sat in my car outside the Third Ward Cafe, staring at the familiar neon sign through tears of rage and relief. They'd planned to destroy my life to save their own. And if I hadn't found my conscience, if I hadn't remembered who I was beneath the corporate facade, they would have succeeded. My phone rang. Keisha, girl, where are you? We saw the news. You blew the whistle on those fools. I'm outside the cafe, I said, my voice hoarse. Stay right there. Within 20 minutes, all 3 of my friends had arrived. They surrounded my car like a protective barrier, then pulled me inside to our corner booth. Tell us everything, Tamara said. So I did. The fraud, the setup, the federal investigation, Max. The lies I'd been telling myself for years, all of it came pouring out like poison from a wound. When I finished, Denise was the first to speak. Monique, baby, God saved your life. How do you figure? Think about it. You've been running from him for years, chasing everything but what matters, and just when those fools were about to destroy you, he gave you the conscience to do right. He used your integrity to save you from their trap. I hadn't thought of it that way. In all my anger and fear, I hadn't considered that my sudden attack of conscience might have been divine intervention. Remember what Pastor Williams said last Sunday, Keisha added, about how God will use even our mistakes to work his purpose. Your job was killing your soul, Mo. Your relationship with Max was killing your spirit, and God used your integrity to get you out of both before they destroyed you completely. That night, I drove through the Third Ward slowly, seeing it with new eyes. These streets that had raised me, this community that had shaped me, the values that had been instilled in me from childhood. I'd spent 20 years running from them, thinking they were holding me back. But they weren't holding me back. They were holding me together. I parked outside Greater Hope Baptist and sat staring at the simple wooden cross illuminated above the entrance. How many times had I passed this building as a child? How many times had I sat in those pews, learning about a God who loved me not for what I accomplished, but for who I was? Jesus? I whispered, the name feeling foreign and familiar at the same time. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for running. I'm sorry for compromising. I'm sorry for building my life on everything except you. The tears came then, years of them, tears for the integrity I'd compromised, for the relationships I'd sacrificed, for the woman I'd lost somewhere between my Third Ward roots and my corporate ambitions. I don't know how to come back. I confessed to the cross, to the night, to the God I'd been ignoring for too long. I don't know how to be the person I was supposed to be. In the silence that followed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace, not the absence of problems. I still faced unemployment, scandal, an uncertain future, but the peace that comes from stopping the pretense, from laying down the masks, from admitting the truth about who I'd become and who I wanted to be. My phone buzzed. Another message from Max, alternating between anger and manipulation as he'd been doing for weeks. I deleted it without reading and blocked his number. Then I typed a message to my friends. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for seeing who I really was when I forgot. I love you all. The next morning, I woke up unemployed, single, and facing an uncertain future. But for the first time in years, I also woke up free. Free from the pressure to be perfect. Free from relationships built on compromise. Free from the exhausting work of pretending to be someone I wasn't. I made coffee and sat on my small balcony, watching the sun rise over Houston. The federal investigation would continue. The trial would be difficult. Finding new employment wouldn't be easy, especially with the scandal in the news. But I had something I'd been missing for 20 years. I had myself back. And for the first time since I was 12 years old, sitting in that baptismal pool at Greater Hope Baptist, I felt Jesus beside me, not as a distant God to be impressed with my accomplishments, but as a friend who'd been waiting patiently for me to come home. The next few months tested every ounce of faith I thought I had. The media coverage was relentless. Executive turned whistleblower. Corporate scandal rocks Houston financial sector. Local woman exposes million-dollar fraud. My face was on the news nightly. My name in every financial blog. Finding work proved nearly impossible. Even though I was the hero of the story, other corporations saw me as a liability. Who wants to hire someone who might expose their secrets? My savings dwindled. The mortgage became a monthly terror. I sold my car and bought a used Honda. Traded my designer clothes for thrift store finds. Learned to clip coupons like my grandmother used to do. Without the demands of corporate life, I had time. Time to rebuild relationships I'd neglected. Time to remember what I enjoyed. Time to pray without checking my phone. Keisha, Tamara, and Denise rallied around me like the sisters they'd always been. They helped me with groceries when money was tight, included me in family dinners when loneliness threatened to overwhelm me, and reminded me daily that my worth wasn't tied to my employment status. You're glowing, Tamara observed one evening, as we sat in her kitchen, helping her daughter with homework. I know that sounds crazy with everything you're going through, but you look more like yourself than you have in years. She was right. Despite the financial stress, despite the uncertainty, I felt more alive than I had in decades. I was sleeping better, laughing more, engaging with people authentically instead of performing for them. 6 months after the scandal broke, I received a call from Dr. Patricia Williams, the president of Texas Southern University. Miss Jackson, I've been following your story, she said. What you did took tremendous courage. I'd like to discuss an opportunity with you. The opportunity was to create and lead a new program, Corporate Ethics and Social Responsibility, teaching business students how to navigate moral challenges in the workplace. We need someone who's walked the walk, Dr. Williams explained during our meeting. Someone who understands both the temptations and the consequences. Someone who chose integrity when it cost them everything. The salary was half what I'd made at Houston Financial Partners. The office was a fraction of the size of my former corner suite. But as I stood in that simple classroom, looking out at eager young faces, faces that looked like mine, faces from neighborhoods like the Third Ward, I felt something I hadn't experienced in my corporate job for years. Purpose. On my first day of classes, I looked out at a room full of students. Black, brown, white, first-generation college students with dreams and determination in their eyes. And I knew I was exactly where God wanted me. How many of you want to be successful? I asked. Every hand went up. Good. Now, how many of you want to be successful at any cost? The hands stayed up, but more hesitantly. Let me tell you a story, I said, about a woman who got everything she thought she wanted and discovered it was nothing she actually needed. I told them about the Third Ward girl who traded her identity for acceptance, about the executive who compromised her values for advancement, about the woman who nearly lost everything because she forgot who she was. But I also told them about redemption, about second chances, about a God who can take our biggest mistakes and turn them into our greatest ministry. Success without integrity is just failure with better clothes, I concluded. And no job, no matter how prestigious, is worth your soul. One evening, as I was packing up my classroom, I found a note from Max, slipped under my door. He'd been trying to reach me for months, calling from different numbers when I blocked him, showing up at places he knew I'd be. The note was typical Max, dramatic, manipulative, designed to make me feel guilty for abandoning him. I left Candace, it read. I did what you wanted. We can start over now. Call me. I stared at the note for a long moment, remembering the woman who would have been thrilled by these words a year ago. The woman who had waited 3 years for this exact moment. But that woman was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that love doesn't ask you to wait for scraps. That real relationships aren't built on betrayal of other relationships. That starting over meant starting right, not just starting again. I crumpled the note and threw it away. Then I called Keisha. He finally left his wife, I said without preamble. And nothing. I don't want him anymore. The silence stretched for a moment. Then Keisha's laughter filled the phone. Mo, baby, that's the Holy Ghost talking. The old you would have been planning a wedding by now. She was right. The old me would have seen his divorce as vindication, as proof that our relationship had been real. But the new me understood that any relationship built on deception and compromise was already broken before it began. That night, as I prepared for bed, I did what I'd been doing every night for the past 3 years. I knelt beside my bed and thanked God for his patience during my years of wandering, for his protection during my time of trial, for his purpose that had emerged from my pain. Use me tomorrow too, Lord, I prayed. Use my story, my scars, my second chance to help someone else find their way home to you. And in the quiet of my small bedroom, in the peace of a life aligned with God's will, I felt the same presence I'd felt that night in the church parking lot, when everything had fallen apart. Jesus was still there, still loving, still leading, still turning broken stories into beautiful testimonies, still making all things new.